Thank you all so much for returning for our second In Conversation. Ian and I will be chairing this conversation as we explore the role of collectivism and collaboration in the respective practices of our panelists here. I will start with a quick introduction to the people that have joined the panel that you hadn't seen before. So to my right, in the green, I have the other green, is Bolanle Tajudeen. So Bolanle is a curator and educator. Bolanle founded Black Blossoms in 2015. Yay, woo woo! Yeah. I've lost. Yeah, so Black Blossoms has been supporting and highlighting Black women artists through an interactive public program featuring exhibitions, panels, and screenings throughout the UK. And in 2020, Black Blossoms established Black Blossoms School of Art and Culture. Yeah. To expand critical and diverse thought that will decolonize and disrupt Eurocentric art and creative education. And we just want to add that Black Blossoms is also working with the wider exhibition, The More Things Change, in regards to digital content. And so we'll be sharing a lot of really interesting articles and interviews throughout the duration of the show. So look out for that. If you're not following, follow them on Instagram and other social media platforms, because they'll be sharing a lot of content, or on their website. So we're just really interested in how Black Blossoms are going to curate some of the wider conversations that will happen beyond today. So thank you. Next to Bolanle, we have Jade Foster here. Yeah. So Jade Foster is a British artist, curator, and cultural strategist of Afro-Caribbean heritage based in Nottingham. Jade is a trustee and board member of Nottingham Contemporary and has worked as an independent and institutional curator with multiple visual organizations and festivals such as CCA Glasgow, Glasgow International Festival of Contemporary Visual Art, Performing Borders and Never Done, Primary, Two Queens, and UK New Artists. They were a 2021 CCCADI Cultural Fellow in Afro-Caribbean Art and is now currently a Ferb Garb Scholarship 2022-2023 recipient of the MA in History of Art at UCL. So thanks for joining us today. And next to Ian, we have two members of Black Obsidian Sound System. In the black and the glasses is Evan Ifekoya. And next to Evan, we have Phoebe Collings-James. So thank you both for joining us. And I'll say a little bit about Black Obsidian Sound System. So Black Obsidian Sound System was established in 2018 to bring together a community of queer, trans, and non-binary Black people and people of color involved in art, sound, and radical activism. Following the legacies of sound system culture, they wanted to learn, build, and sustain a resource for collective struggles. The London-based system is available to use or rent by community groups and others with the purpose of amplifying and connecting them. So thank you so much for being here today. And then I'm now going to hand over to Ian to continue the intros.
Thank you. Yep. So I'm going to just quickly say the Black Art Group, founded by members Claudette Johnson, Keith Piper, Marlene Smith. We have Janet Vernon, who we all met earlier on. So in terms of the Black Art Group, there's also another iteration, and we'll talk about the Black Art Group Research Project, which was formed in 2011 by Claudette, Keith, and Marlene. And the research group was taking a renewed examination of the archives and the historical legacies of the Black Art Group from 79 to 84. At its starting point, this project exists to promote debate, inquiry, scholarship and understanding of what has become known as the British Black Art Movement of the 1980s. The project aims to bring together a body of work contextualizing, documenting, and critiquing this movement and the social, cultural, and political epoch which gave rise to it. During 2012, two major projects were staged by this research group, a symposium which coincided with a retrospective exhibition titled The Black Art Group, held at Graves Gallery, Sheffield, and an international conference entitled Reframing the Moment, held at University of Wolverhampton. And now we are here for another iteration. So thank you.
And we also have Janet, who, as we've said, has reconnected with the group 40 years later. So thank you, Janet. Janet Vernon is formally trained as a visual artist, attaining a BA Honours in Fine Art, and is currently based in Derby. Vernon was a founder member of the Black Art Group, exhibiting in the Black Art and Done exhibition at Wolverhampton Art Gallery in '81. And as Keith mentioned earlier, she was also the vice chair at the first National Black Art Convention in 1982 at the University of Wolverhampton, which was formerly the Wolverhampton Polytechnic. So thank you so much, Janet, for being here as well.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so we're gonna go straight into the first question. And Evan and Phoebe are gonna start us off with their response. And that question is, we'll start with you, Evan, is what does collectivism, collaboration, and community mean to you? And how does this translate through your practice?
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, I came out of university in 2010 feeling very alone. I studied fine art, not in London actually, at Winchester School of Art, so kind of around the South Coast. And yeah, it was a very isolating environment creatively. I had a sense of, a few artists, like I had come across Maud Salter's work, but I didn't have a sense of a Black art movement. So it wasn't until after university where I started to kind of wonder and question, where are the people who look like me, whose work, is asking some of the same questions that my work is asking, or, kind of concerned with, our histories as, Black and people of color artists. So when I moved back to London, I started to seek those people out. So, when I had access to space, I would hold space for people to be in conversation. And as part around 2012, I started a group called Collective Creativity with Raju Ray, Raisa Kabir, Rudy Lowe. And we would just meet informally at Tate, where I was working at the time. So it was, these were informal meetings. Tate didn't know that I was inviting my friends to have meetings, and I would invite people. And, then I was also, getting to know more about, artists like Sonia Boyce, Labena Hamid. And then, I had a wonderful encounter at an event that Marlene organized towards the end of 2013. And that's when I met, a lot of these amazing artists, like, in person for the first time. And, as Keith said, like, for me, that was really encouraging. We swapped emails, and that's when, this kind of loose back and forth started. And that's when I also started to do more archival research, learning more about, Black Art Group, the works that you've done, individually and collectively. And it really inspired me. It really inspired me, and again, we were kind of, Collective Creativity was continuing to meet. We're reflecting on texts by people, such as Stuart Hall, Kabina Mercer. So it was about this idea of holding space to talk and reflect on the issues that concerned our practice. And so, for me, I'm really concerned with, as a Black queer person, what does it mean to create, I'm interested in space and placemaking, essentially. So the works that I create, through video, performance, installation, are all about taking up and holding a space that didn't previously exist. And, again, through more research and through more connecting and being interested in nightlife, but also feeling like the spaces were compromised. And that was when, kind of around 2017, when I was asked to do a show at Gasworks, which actually the invitation was to do a solo show. But, even at that point, I think I've always been somebody that questioned the idea of like the singular artist, the artist as, the singular artist as this authority figure. That was something I've always challenged, and I've always been interested in, what does it mean to be in dialogue with others in the context of art? So the show at Gasworks, Richer Without Belief, the process of that show, it was a sound-led exhibition. So in the process of that show, the idea, again through conversation and as a result of all of these other conversations and archival work I'd been doing, and also being inspired by family, friends, this idea to create a system with members of my community, just kind of, it kind of came to my mind. And I actually, I had to, the actual system was funded through Arts Council. I kind of wrote, I was like, oh yeah, as part of this show, I want to create the system with my community, so that was how the seed for the system was able to kind of, be planted and then begin to grow. So the physical system was part of this exhibition, Rich Without Belief, where I actually also showed a work by a Jabu called Bodybuilder with Bra. So again, this idea of, being in dialogue, with elders, with people whose practices really speak to me, it's just fundamental to the way that I work as an artist, and it continues to be, 5-6 years since then. And so then after the show, the system then took on a name, Black Obsidian Sound System, and then just like kind of other people have kind of become involved across that time. And so now, the narrative around, like for me, it was also very important that the narrative around the system didn't start with me, in terms of the bio. I didn't want it to be, it started at, as part of, for me, it's not about that. Because really, the idea was always that the show would become a thing that is owned, organized with my community. The idea is that it's a non-hierarchical technology, that we are all agents of, that we all kind of take ownership of. That's something that feels very important to me, and how we work. And it's incredibly challenging, it's incredibly challenging, to work in community and in dialogue with, a number of different artists who, all have individually really amazing practices, and then it's like, what does it mean to come together around this system, or the system being the central thing? Because yes, we do, we do events, we do club nights, we also provide, the system also is it provides the it's also used, like for example, a friend of ours, Jamila, who's a dancer, used the system as part of a recent dance work, so it can also become part of other people's works as well. So there's this kind of constant oscillation of the system. We're constantly in dialogue with other members of our community, and that's also part of its beauty. And as well as that, we've made film, and we've done exhibitions. We were nominated for, what was it called? The Turner Prize? Oh yeah, that thing a couple of years ago. That one. That was kind of random. I mean, I could go on, but I'll stop there, I think. But that's a little bit about me, I think, and what Boss and Collectivism is.
Thank you for those words, and thank you for being you, and for giving us these seeds. I had known Evan's work, and we were kind of in community with each other and had lots of close mutual friends, but it was actually at a house party, which I think is probably going to be quite relevant for maybe, other places where these conversations happen. And we must have really got into it, because the next morning I was in the WhatsApp group and I was suddenly part of Boss, and we were definitely talking about like legacies, artists we looked up to, sound systems we looked up to, how we kind of make new things and also reference those histories, talking about what was good and what was not good in London right now or right then. And those kind of dialogues continue. And I think also where we differ and where we come together is a constant part of it. I think in terms of collective work, for me, it's quite vital. A lot of what Evan said rings true. I think especially the more you are able to, I've personally been able to pursue art in a kind of as the main thing I do in my days and life. That can also become quite an insular practice if you go by the guidance of what is set out by museums and institutions and art industry. And so I do think in terms of pushback, if resistance and radical can sometimes mean pushing back, or maybe always includes that, I think these moments of collectivism really does speak to that. And, you know, like even with that prize, it was something we constantly had to say, which was that we do not speak as individuals, you know, even though we might have all of our fights or like discussions in between us, when we're speaking out, when we come to a conclusion about something, we speak together, and you can't try and get in sideways at us, which was definitely something that often had to be reiterated. I think something, so that's definitely the collective being a way of kind of negotiating this like sort of very capitalist force on the individual is one thing. It's also can be more fun and less lonely. And yeah, I think I'm often thinking in my work is like, how do we live together? How do we love each other? And having to deal with people who are your friends, but you know, it's not always just based in, you know, oh, we're best mates, now we're going to do this together. Sometimes, you know, as I guess we've already heard, like people are coming at things from different points of view. And I think that for me is like one of the most important parts of my work and the work we've been able to do as BOSS. I don't think it's too much to say that we had a facilitation this week with this amazing person who's doing a lot of work with, like conflict resolution, and she's also like training to be a DJ and is a DJ. So that was also, you know, part of a sort of share of skills and knowledge. And, you know, this week we just had such this incredible breakthrough where we really realized like we were so on the same page and the vision was coming through, and we had much more clear ways of thinking about like how do we deal with conflict and, you know, people who have left and it hasn't been great. And like those struggles I take into my daily life, like with my family, in other workplaces. And so yeah, maybe I'll leave it there. Like, how do we live with each other and ourselves? Like, is really important. I think it comes through in the work we do, and we love sound and bass.
Pass the microphone.
Oh, it's past my time.
It's past the mic time.
We're talking about what's the question? Collectivism.
Yeah,
I can say the question again.
Yeah.
I think we were just thinking through this idea of collectivism, collaboration, and community, and what it means to you, and how does this translate to your practice. And I know you touched upon it a little bit earlier.
Yeah,
So
I think, well, for me, because most of my work has been in the community, and there has been like loose kind of collectives and collaborating with other artists. I came from a community artist space. I worked in a community arts centre for about 8 or 9 years, and in that time we had to kind of collaborate with other organisations. So, and also we'd put on exhibitions as well, but each of us were practitioners. I suppose that was like a loose collective in itself, really. Each of us were actual practitioners. So we had to run workshops, but it's also, I suppose it's also working with, my experience is also working with other organisations, and just thinking about other community organisations. I remember that there's like a youth organisation. So the way I would see it is that they'd approach us and say, we want to put some activities on, like for the young people. And sometimes it's just devising a program. And I think that was very, very important for me working like that. And also it's sharing skills as well. I think when I think about collectivism, I think it's about sharing skills. And I'm thinking more recently with lockdown, which is kind of been, I've been on like I've done like some adult education online courses. You know, I thought, oh, I wanted to improve my printmaking, and what you talked about WhatsApp group. You've been on a course, and then you find people that have a similar kind of interest, and I'm on about 2 or 3 WhatsApp groups. So, and where people just share, you're just sharing your work, and where every now and then we'll have a monthly meetup, and you just, so when I'm thinking about it from my community base, but I'm thinking about it more now with how with the event of technology, how it's much broader with sharing information and having people that are like-minded like yourself, and it's and where it's a really supportive community as well. So I think that's for me, that's helped my practice as well, especially when you're sharing skills and you're just stuck on something and you post something, can somebody just look at this, and then you get quite a lot of help like that. So that's my take on it anyway.
Thank you,
Yes.
Jane.
Sean.
I will say something extremely quickly because
You're tired.
I am tired after lunch and everything, so I'm about to fall asleep. However, I think in terms of kind of something which was touched on earlier about what does contemporary radicality mean, I'm thinking about the stuff which you've said around how you kind of haven't functioned as a collective. I think that is one of the kind of key ways in which real radicality in terms of contemporary practice is articulating itself. And you spoke briefly about that kind of at some fascinating moments when you and 3 other collectives were nominated for the Turner Prize in terms of something which would then upend this whole idea of the individual artist. So collective practices are really interesting in really ways. And in terms of kind of what you said about artists embedded within particular communities, which are communities of kind of sharing skills and sharing solutions and teaching and all those kind of things. These are also really, really fascinating places to kind of look. I mean, in terms of the history of the Black Art Group, it was a group. It was never a collective. Yeah, I mean, we were really individual artists who were using that thing of meeting occasionally, and we were actually located in different places geographically. So often we would only meet, for group meetings when we were planning something and traveling from wherever it was, Bradford and Sunderland and Oliver to meet. And so it's more a kind of model, which is an important model, of individual artists forming a support structure in order to kind of get something done. And that is a really important model as well. Obviously, at that moment in the early 80s, there were collectives. The one marked mostly like Black Audio Film Collective and Sankofa and those other collectives of artists. But in terms of their practice, because their practice was film, and film lends itself absolutely to collective practice because it's about a range of individuals with a range of skill sets coming together. That's also why I'm interested in the sound system, because the sound system historically is a collective activity. You would need a group of people and specific individuals with very specific skills. So I really love the way that you've taken that form and then really, turned it on its head and done some really radical and interesting things about it. But that's all and community in terms of the last thing. No, because I'm loving the picture. Does everybody know what this picture is? This picture is incredible. This picture is was taken last year in October, which is the 40-year anniversary of the first Black Art convention.
Yeah, it was.
Yes, it was.
It's in the resource.
Yeah.
It's in the resource rooms.
Yeah, so this was taken last year in October, on the 40th anniversary of the first National Black Art Convention at the Black Cultural Archives in London.
Yeah.
And their thing, which I actually differed from, I did have arguments, but they said that this event, or the event here 40 years ago, marks the start of the Black Art movement.
Oh, wow.
You know, discuss. But it was great and fantastic in terms of a community. And this community here is, as you can see, a community of artists. It has been pointed out that, if this is talking about a community of Black artists, it's very specifically a community of artists of African descent. Another thing to think about and discuss.
Yes.
However, I mean, fascinating. I'm going to leave it there because.
I think just to say that this photograph is in the exhibition in the last resource room, so you can sort of have a look and see the names of the different artists that were part of it as well. So,
Old folk at the front.
and then we'll move to Marlene. Yeah. Are you?
Do you want
the
the question again, or are you cool?
Please. What's the question?
Okay. What does collectivism, collaboration, and community mean to you, and how does this translate through your respective practices? That was the overarching question.
So just picking up on what Keith was saying about the Black Art Group not being a collective. The Black Art Group was essential to me to get me through the first couple of years of being an artist. I don't think I would have been able to survive it if I'd been working in the way that the institution expected, which would be to be a solo artist working alone and getting my and having only the students at the college to be my sounding board. So I always say that the Black Art Group wasn't the reason that I went to art school, but it was the reason I was able to finish art school. In terms of community, I suppose that my work very often draws on the iconography of the home. And I'm very conscious when I'm using these items and when I'm displaying them in gallery spaces that I'm talking to a community. I'm talking about a community and I'm talking to a community. I'm hoping that there'll be linkages made between the viewers and what I'm producing. I've never been part of a collective, but I was really envious of the Black Audio Film Collective because they had a structure and a way of presenting themselves in one voice, which we never had as the Black Art Group. And I'm really impressed by when I come across groups and that there are a few collectives of young Black artists that are making work now. And I'm always impressed when I come across them because they have a commitment to each other as well as their practice. So that's all I'm going to say. Thanks.
No. What an esteemed panel to be on. Thank you, Sylvia and Ian, for the invite. Quick thing about this photo. I was 5 minutes late, so that's why I'm not in the photo. I was actually wearing this exact same outfit, so I feel like now I'm superimposed into the photo. So I'm very grateful for Lisa for organising that photo shoot. So I think when I think about this question, I think more about community and collaboration. I think about collectivism on one part, but it's very separate to Black Blossoms because Black Blossoms is an organisation which I am the solo founder, so therefore decisions are made by me. But I have a lot of friends who are artists, creatives, and they're great sounding boards. However, like when I think about why and how I started Black Blossoms, it's very similar to like how Marlene came around making housekeeping, that anger that I had in 2015. Just, I think Tamar Rice, it was Trayvon Martin, Tamar Rice. Like, I was working in the student union, so I come into, I went to art school, but I studied public relations. But I was in the student union. I was really into activism at the time. And I just remember feeling like really disheartened. And I was angry all the time. And I remember I read the Kahambi River Statement Collective statement on Black feminism. And they talk about this idea of going crazy when you're starting to realize that, you know, there's gender, race, and all of these other isms. And I wasn't young, like I was a mature student. So I was about 23, 24, and like really having this reckoning of like, oh my gosh, I'm about to graduate and I'm realizing that I'm actually a Black woman. And all of these other questions that I had in my mind. And I just remember feeling so angry at the time. And I don't know if I had Evan on Facebook at the time, but I had many of your friends and people that I know that you worked with. And I was so inspired by so many of the conversations happening in Facebook groups. Wow, there was a lot of Facebook groups at that time. There was so many Facebook groups. And and the student union that I worked in was University of the Arts London. And another thing that I was really angry about was the attainment grades of Black and brown students. So they were like 21% less likely to get a first or a 2-1. And it was really annoying me because I was just like, why? And what do you mean you don't understand? And I remember going to like meetings with vice chancellors and I was like, we know we've got this problem, but it's going to take 10 years. And I was like, what? What do you mean it's going to take 10 years? And like, yeah, looking back, I can see why it takes 10 years, but looking forward, I couldn't understand. And I was very, it was actually a really sad time. And even personally as well, because sometimes we talk about politically the heartbreak in society that we're facing, but also just as a person, I was going through breakups and makeups and I was raising a young child. So even personally, like I was having a lot of like deep emotions within myself. And 2015, I decided, there was an incident at UAL, which I can't bother to talk about, but I decided to launch Black Blossoms, and it very much started off as conferences, just like this. We would have, the first one was just looking at Black women in media and art, and it was for Black women and Black non-binary people, and it was really a safe space. That concept of safe space in 2015 was a really big thing. I think we've moved away from that now, but it was really big. And I remember having this conference, and so many people came. And I remember I was also interested in having Asian women on the panel, and I got dragged on that on Twitter because obviously the event was branded as a Black women's event, but I'm not going to be like, oh, I'm a super fan of political Blackness, but I do think that we're not talking with each other. And there's many reasons for that. There's like obviously anti-Blackness, there's many reasons why as Black and brown people living in Britain, that there's a lot of conflict between us outside of white supremacy, made by white supremacy. So after the conferences, I had the opportunity to create an exhibition, and honestly, that was my calling. After that exhibition, someone came to the exhibition, and it was in UAL, it was in the showroom, so it was like a street-facing exhibition, and someone said, oh, it's got the energy of the 80s Black art movement. That was it. I was like, yeah. And like, to be honest, at that time, I knew, because I would organize events to the archive at Chelsea, like I would say it was a very basic understanding of Black art and the Black arts movement. And I remember I met you, Marlene, and I didn't know much. And I think the naivety of what I knew is why Black Blossoms is probably so successful. Because if I had gone through the art school route and I had known more, I would have probably went straight into an institution. But I decided to do a tour which Jade was part of. Marlene came and done a talk using very much the same ethos of Lebena and yourself, inviting all the women and people who were selected to be part of the show. We had a mini conference just for them so they can get to know each other, and we held workshops. And you know, I really enjoy curating, but I felt like, you know what, after the tour, I felt like the art world was copying me, but I think that was just me being in my ego. But there was, but like as soon after I'd done like the Black Blossoms exhibition, there was like all of these commercial shows with just Black women non-binary people, and I was just like, okay, cool. I'm a tastemaker, that's fine. And then I kind of wanted to learn more, and I was invited into Tate, which Jade reminded me. I had like, there were so many things that happened, but I started teaching art in the age of Black Girl Magic because I actually wanted to understand my own practice more. I wanted to understand, Lebena had just won the Turner. It was just a very interesting time for Black, and as I said, I could see the landscape of these commercial shows happening and Black women in America and England getting picked up by really big commercial galleries, and that trend is really continuing. So since Lebena Himid, we've had Sonia Boyce, Barbara Walker's just been nominated for a Turner, we had Boss, like all of these great things, yeah. Ingrid Pollard last year, of course, you know. So
Veronica Ryan was there.
yeah. Veronica Ryan won.
Yeah.
So like, you really like, I really felt I could really see from in 2015 where Lebena talks about this wilderness. I feel like there was a wilderness amongst our generation as well. And social media definitely 100% shifted what we all now know as this contemporary, I don't even want to call it a contemporary Black arts movement because I don't think that's what it is, but I just think the fact that we can all be in touch more and talk with each other, and we know each other's practices and we can share information very quickly. I don't know if our generation had to write letters like your generation. Like, we don't even answer our emails on time, let alone write these letters. So, and then fast forward to the pandemic, I launched a Black Blossom School of Art and Culture, which is honestly one of my proudest things with Black Blossoms. And Evan Ifekoya was one of our first tutors. Sold out course. People, literally, I got an email about it last week, and Evan taught that course in 2020. So people are still emailing about the courses today. And I have Birinji's there. We have a Black Blossoms WhatsApp group. And yeah, there's like 200 people in that group. And do you know what? We actually just use that group to like say, this is the private view we're going to, and this is what the parties are. Like, you know, because I actually really like the social side of the art world. And I think it's actually important that we have these spaces as conferences, but the social side in which what you lot were talking about, like the parties, that's where you meet people just on a vibe. Like, I was at a party the other day, I got like 5 cards, and like, I don't even know who these people are. I remember just like one flew out of my pocket the other day. I was like, the sales director, like, what am I going to do? Talk to you about? But these are where you really, of course, maybe there is a conversation, but but I think like these are where you make that really really. Anyway, I don't want to take up too much time, but Black Blossoms for me is definitely all about collaboration and all about community. And I'm gonna say it, I am so grateful to like stand on everyone's shoulders from the 80s. And, you know, because for me, like, knowing where we come from is one of the most important things to understand where we're going, and to also understand the patterns of the art world, because people can, if you look at the 80s and you had the Black Arts movement and then the YBAs came, you know, we've had this whole like Black Lives Matter movement, and there's been a bunch of articles recently about commercial gallery spaces that are opening up in London. And a lot of most of the commercial galleries that have been mentioned are white ran. And although they're intersectional gallery, like, you know, they always have a Black artist now or a trans artist of color, you can see this sort of shift again into this, I don't know if it's in a re-emergence of a YBA culture, but you can see you can see it happening again. And that's why understanding the history of the Black Arts Movement is very pivotal to like my practice now, because you're able to spot it, call it out. And even if nothing happens, you're able to see like, and there's a reason why I don't have a commercial gallery and I've got an online art school. The same way there's a reason why the artists in the 80s went into teaching and didn't get commercially represented. That these things don't happen. It's like a, yeah, that's it, basically.
Yeah, that's probably better. No, I'm good. So, wow. So I'm actually in this picture, but I'm standing next to Phoebe Boswell, who I recontacted because I have a drawing practice, and I was like, "Where's the drawing at?" So, in terms of Black artists and drawing, like Claudette Johnson, I'm really passionate about just being in dialogue and being in community. But I was invited on by Rihanna Jade Parker, but also my relationship to the Black Art Group or Black Arts Movement goes back to 2012. So I'm from Sandwell, I'm from Wednesbury, around the corner. And when I was growing up, I had no clue that this history was pretty much on my doorstep. My family are also from Handsworth, Great Bar, Perry Bar, across West Brom, Sandwell. Yay! Thanks, Beverly. So I never knew this history was on my doorstep. So when I was at A-level, I was like, researching about the Black Arts Movement in the US, because that's all I knew of at the time. And then a youngster, 16 years old, applied for this open call, this called the Open Project, and Marlene Smith was one of the curatorial mentors on this program. Also Craig Ashley, who worked at MAC at the time, MAC Birmingham, was running this program. So I was this naive, very troubled 16-year-old who really struggled to turn up on time because I just had a lot of anxiety. You get, you're a teenager, this is a big thing, you get overwhelmed. But, from that interaction with Marlene, that just opened up a whole new world that I didn't even know was just there. In these communities, in these places that I've been growing up in all my life, and how I never got access to it. Let's talk about Sandwell, and let's talk about this borough, the Black country, and the lack of access, to these collective histories, because they are our histories, and we should have access to it. So for me, I'm very passionate about people feeling like they don't need to go somewhere else, to London or to another ecosystem to find community or to feel like they're part of a history, and actually, seeing and thinking about the place you're in and what's there, I think is important. But from that opportunity, I felt that I had like an art mother, and I would class like Marlene as my art mother. Yeah, sweet. And from that, you also invited me to do a talk about the Black Arts Movement at Battersea Arts Centre back in 2018. And again, wow, I was like, I'm a bit like you, you know, you're just like, what's going on? And from there, you were doing the Black Art Research Group in 2012, and luckily I was just around the time I was able to go to one of those sessions and saw Claudette Johnson's work, and I was like, oh my God, this is honestly, it's so educational at 16, to have access to that. It really does change your life. Fundamentally, this type of history changes your life. And then slowly when going to university, I was broadened and opened up more, opportunities opened up for me, and I got to meet other artists, I got to travel. I feel like it's interesting, there's a really great relationship between the West and the East Midlands. So at the moment I'm based in Nottingham, and there's a big history, Keith, with artists that are working cross-regionally. And if you think about the Black Art Group, that was a really core thing that was going on, this cross-regional
conversation and dialogue, you know? And sort of currently in my practice, I'm very interested in cross-regional dialogue. So sort of as an artist and a curator, sort of moving through, I've been able to be a part of, you know, shows like with B and just projects over time. But in 2018, I was like, I feel lonely. I'm still feeling lonely. I'm in Derby. There's not people who look like me in Derby studying. There's a big community of Black artists in London, but I can't afford to go and do those trips, you know? I cannot afford to be at the gallery opening, get your email address, you know, that also, if you think about access, it's about what are the barriers to getting there, to being in those spaces. But I think towards that, I was like, I really want to create a network. I think Keith was saying about support structure for people to have dialogue cross-regionally. So I kind of started to develop the idea around a curatorial kind of collective or structure, which would allow curators across regions to have dialogue. So I set up the Black Curators Collective in 2020. Thank you. And that space very much came out of George Floyd's murder, but also just all the feeling lonely. And it was just more for me, like I wanted to connect. I wanted to feel connection. But I knew that other people regionally who were maybe in the north, in Wales, might be feeling equally as lonely, you know? And so it was more about how can we find intimacy. So when I think about this question about collectivity, for me, it's about intimacy. It's knowing people on a first name basis, not just I know of you and I know of your practice, but actually feeling a sense of I can call you by your first name and I can have this sort of informal dialogue. I can feel like through our interaction, you know, if I've got a query, a question, a trouble, a concern, a challenge, that I can have transparent, open dialogue with you. And for me, this collective, which, you know, at the time there were 17 people in the network, and I think just like Boss, we've had lots of arguments and lots of conflict, but that happens, you know. Well, I think what you're sort of talking about, this idea of like how do you, you know, work through difficulties in a space, I think that was definitely, you know, when you're bringing such a broad network together and everyone are in different places in their career, they're situated differently, their philosophy is different, the practice that they have is different, that's going to cause form of tension. But I think mentalize who they were, they could just turn up as they are. And for me, that is incredibly important. I think what working collaboratively does, it makes you feel that you don't have to part yourself. Like, you know, you're in an institution, so you have to bring part of yourself. Like, you think intersectionally, you think about the relationship between gender, sexuality, you know, blackness, all of these things and more. And nobody has to feel like you're feeling pressured. I think the other panel was sort of talking about being confined in a box, or this expectation of what your practice should be, or how you should turn up, or how you should show up. So I think this space really was about bringing curatorial, you know, I think there's a great movement of artists working collaboratively and collectively, but I think in terms of curators, it's rare for curators to come together and think about, okay, how do we take care of ourselves? Like, we have a practice, you know, it's just as artists have a practice, we also have a practice. So how can we have these conversations next to artists and next to collectives of artists working? So we did a project with Glasgow International, and it was a closed door, 2-day sort of, not conference is not the right word, gathering. And there was movement workshops, there was open dialogue, there was opportunities to map together. So for me, mapping is really important, like who is where, you know, and because I think regionally, I'm thinking about who's in Wales, who's in Glasgow, who's in Dundee, who's at, hey, who's in, you know, Sandwell. I'm thinking about the specificities of these people and where they operate and where they work. And I'm very important, you know, for me, it's very important to think that it's not all the same across the board. So where the, you know, the potential for organising in London is a very different energy than in Glasgow. You have, you know, and what I found was that I was learning a lot about the differences within the ecology across sort of this ecosystem which we're part of. And actually, the conversations we're having with Scotland-based practitioners was that they feel like they're 10 years behind England in the conversation that's happening in Scotland. They don't feel part of it, you know, it doesn't feel like they're having this cross-nation, shall I say, dialogue. Is that almost like sometimes we subsume, like we have a narrative of this is happening and it gets subsumed as the main or the dominant narrative. So other practitioners are like, nah, that's not my experience. You're saying that there's this big surge of this, but it's not going on over there. So for me, this network really did open my eyes to the disparity of actually, it might seem like that is happening for everybody, but it isn't. It's happening at different levels. So I think for me, collectivity is also, and community is also knowing that it's not homogenous, that it's not like this sense of everyone is operating similarly and you know, organizing in similar ways and getting access to opportunity in similar ways, and it's not happening. And so for me, this network is definitely about decentralizing some of those discussions and thinking about the specificities of place, you know, and I think that's come up in this conversation, but specificity of place and space. And I think in terms of, you know what I really love? The fact that even though I know people on a first name basis, I don't know a lot of people, but it should be like that. It should be like that because it means it's not scarcity. It means that there's so much going on that I can't know everything. And that is exciting to be able to have, you know, hundreds and thousands, maybe thousands potentially, of Black practitioners making work, doing the thing, and to not know all of that, I think that's how it should be. Like we shouldn't, in lots of ways, yes, first name basis, but it's like I want to keep learning, I want to keep finding things out. I want, you know, I don't want to feel like there's an end to, like an end point, like this is all there is, you know? So yeah, I guess that's just a bit about my relationship to this question, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. With that in mind, we are running a bit behind time, so we're going to open it up to the floor if there are any burning questions. There's a question at the back there.
Yes, it was Cardiff. Yes, we had the show in. Actually, it wasn't the Black Art Group show. Wasn't it? No, it was. Called the next chapter. Or something. Yes, and so the straight answer I think is no. But simply because, I mean, it's interesting because the kind of pattern of venues that we actually managed to kind of get shows into. I mean, if we look back at those,
Yeah.
it would be very much venues with a particular, who are beginning to open up with particular kinds of policies.
So am I wrong then? I thought there was a Black Art Group show at Cardiff at Chapter Arts.
Yes, there was a chapter, next chapter.
Okay.
But I think what Marlene's saying was
Yes.
it
Was
was
it
at
the
Chapter Gallery.
Chapter Arts
Yes.
Gallery. And that
Because
there
I
was
remember that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
As you can see,
This is how fuzzy,
memory.
This is how fuzzy my kind of grasp of the history is. And once again, you know, the collective research minds out here can get to the bottom of this.
As our one question, there seems to be like a very large community of Black artists across England, and there is a large community of Black artists around, so there still seems ways up. So funding is quite like the second form, I think, where this is probably 20 years time, because we are almost like a minority within the place. But it's what we've done basically happening forward and around it.
So I think for artists, it's always about curators in institutions. So I was just recently on a panel for Chapter Art Gallery for the studio residency. I don't know if you saw that, yeah. And the curator there who's behind that initiative is Simrata. And I think curators are like super important to the ecosystem because they go into these institutions with their kind of visions that they want for that space, and they enact it over 3, 5, 6 years. And when you don't have, and this is why it's so, the Black curators is so important, because if you don't have curators in certain institutions or working across certain, even just community spaces, it's really hard for them to, for Black artists to be programmed unless they've kind of gone through the art school route. And then even then, sometimes the framing of the work can be weird when it's not to say that Black artists should only be in Black curated shows, but there are sometimes Black artists do want to be in Black curated shows because of the framing. So I think it's just about the whole ecosystem and not necessarily just the artists. It's about who in the group, like Marlene, who in the group of Black artists is the most organized, that can write a curatorial text that's really bubbly, that can go out and, start networking. And, it's like that kind of, in absence of like the institutional support, like what can you do where you're at? And if there isn't, like from being on that panel specifically in Wales, like I kind of got the sense of what's going on there. And I think it's about working with artists, maybe not just across racial lines, but across like political, social, economic lines. Maybe not too working class, like let's not get into that whole politics of like Black and white working class trying to frame that, because it is a different politics. But yeah, it's just about finding a core group of people that can help push the narrative and like being really bold and audacious with it as well. Yeah.
So one of the members, I don't know if you know personally, yeah. So she's part of Black Curates Collective, and has told me numerous times about how difficult it is to operate, particularly because there's a lot of the National Gallery, and just like how a lot of these spaces are really violent in lots of ways. So it's like also the conversation we're having in the collective is there's people who are independent curators that don't actually work with institutions, and also working not just within non-profit spaces, but they're working community settings, they're working different types of organizations, different, like some people are working commercially. So I think in terms of Wales, like I think I kind of hope and wish that it's about the invitation for conversation. I feel like, I think so. David A. Bailey, he came to a show and I was like really shocked. I was like, oh, hey, David. And I was like, what? He was like, because you invited me and nobody invites me to stuff. So, like if you invite me, I will turn up. And that's like, I think part of it, it's like you need to, like the invitation, like you'd be surprised who will turn up. And I'm not saying that needs to come from you guys. And, I think it needs to be some sort of reciprocal dialogue in which it's like a consistency of invitation and, and I guess a consistency to share practice, to think about how people are organizing, and also to like resource. I'm really like interested in resource building and resource sharing and like circular economy. So I think this idea of like skill sharing, like I think people have talked about here, is like really important. But it's like, okay, maybe it's that you feel 20 years behind because there is something that like it's about methodology or like maybe a mode of operating or, you know, organizing that you would like, how did you do it? Like, you know, there's We Are Here Scotland, for example, how are they organizing? Or there might, you know, Boss, how are they organizing? And I think it's just like that transparency to be like, here's how we're doing it. And then like sharing that and then seeing how that works for a different context, but again, it's a different context. So it's not, you know, how we're organizing, for example, in Nottingham in the East Midlands, it's going to be very different because there's different infrastructures, a different, you know, so it's about like, how do you translate that to the context in which you're working in? But I think invitation is probably what I would say. I don't know.
We got one more. No?
Can I add something? Sorry. And like, you know, just thinking about this term of invitation, it just shows like the art world, you know, we need more press and PR amongst ourselves as well. There's so much more than just being a curator or an artist and a writer. There's so many people that go to art school that don't necessarily want to go into being an artist or a curator, and their skills can be better utilized elsewhere. So like that thing about just invitation, because if you're a curator or artist organizing a show and then thinking about invites, it's a lot for one person to think about, isn't it? So it's just about thinking about how things can be divided within groups. And also sometimes it just takes one artist to like blow in the city. Like for example, Scotland, Alberta Whittle being Venice Biennale for Scotland. She's brought so many artists with her in her practice because her practice is quite collaborative, and then like she cites them in the work, and then you get to know who this artist and then that artist is. It's a really cool way of like knowing the scene there.
Okay. Well, good. Thank you.
Ask it, please.
Yeah. And okay. Just leave it out there. Leave it out.
My question is, how do you collectively archive yourself? Because I think one thing I'm super aware of with this exhibition is that there's this material. Like, where was it? Where did it? How did? So it's just a question of how you're telling us your story now, but what does your archive look like?
Good question.
Very well organised.
Yeah, very good question. Yeah. Okay. It is huge. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to have to wrap up because we're going to make the trek across to the School of Art now for the next part of the day. The Power of Colour exhibition is going to opening. There's the screening, there's a panel discussion, there's more networking, there's some food, and there's a DJ, and it's all about that. I want to thank all the speakers, Marlene Smith, Bolanle, Jade Foster, Sylvia, Evan, Phoebe, Janet, Keith Piper. Thank you all. Thank you, Sapaki, for earlier on today. Thank you all for being here. And yeah, thank you. That's it. It's a wrap. Thank you.